Good afternoon and welcome back. We look forward to you guys joining in on this session for minimum program viability and rapid course development with Sherard Jones. To introduce him is our Director of Accreditation, Ty Kelly.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon for this part of the conference. So I'd like to introduce you to Sherard Jones. He is an IACET commissioner serving as lead reviewer. With more than 15 years of experience within the IACET Standards community, Sherard consults organizations in accreditation services and works on program development for international clients of large associations and jurisdictional agencies. In addition to his work with IACET, he is also a lead assessor for the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, where he performs organizational assessments for the certificate accreditation program. He also serves as CEO of his own endeavor, Strategic Futurist Consulting, an organization providing global leadership in training, credentialing, program accreditation, and organizational development. The company also researches, assesses, and develops processes and strategies that advance corporate visions and organizational goals. He also founded an organization called Viable, which guides aspiring entrepreneurs into successfully launching niche business enterprises. And finally, he serves as an adjunct professor in the College of Educational Leadership and Development at Northeastern Illinois University. So it is my pleasure to present to you Mr. Sherard Jones. Sherard?
Hey, Ty. Hey, everybody.
Thank you
so much. I'm good. That was a fantastic introduction. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. So thanks, everybody, for joining us for this session. I really appreciate you choosing to be here right now. This is a topic that I'm very excited about, passionate about. As Ty told you, I have a number of years of experience with IACET on both sides of the table. So I have been in AP. I have guided organizations through accreditation, and I've also been a commissioner. So, so with all of that information and all of that experience, I really thought that it would be helpful to try to put some guidance together to assist us in the processes of developing courses and being able to document them. If you all were on the session yesterday afternoon with the APs, we discussed documentation and kind of the difficulties in documentation, primarily the needs analysis. So I just want to touch on protocol that we can use to help to do this quickly and to gather all the information that we need in order to develop a viable course. So here is our presentation. And what I'm hoping that we can get through this in the hour. It was really an ambitious program, but really I wanted everyone to leave with tools and to be able to test drive the methodology for a minimum program viability and rapid course development. First off, I have to give you all my statement of proprietary interest. This is in the standard, and we want to be sure that we are doing what we ask APs to do. So I am the owner of Strategic Futurist Consulting, and we designed this iterative course development document, which you should have received already and that we'll be going through in the course of this program. It's made available as a free resource, but there will be no attempts to sell any products or services related to Strategic Futurist Consulting during this presentation. The learning objectives for today. So by the end of this session, you all will be able to define minimum viability, the minimum viability development approach. You'll be able to identify which standard elements apply to modules of the iterative course development document, and you'll be able to follow along and populate a practice iterative course development document for yourself. So before we get started, Alexa is going to help us and launch a poll, because what we're going to do is to have a pre-test, post-test format, which is really an easy way to assess learning. The first thing that we're going to do is to ask you questions before you presented the information that's provided in the course, and then we'll follow up at the end of the course and offer you the same test to identify if learning has occurred and where it has occurred. So Alexa, I will turn it over to your expertise.
Thanks, Sherard. So participants, if you have been following along with us at these various sessions, you will be probably quite familiar with how the polling works. We just wanted to make a note, this is a little bit different in that we have several different polls, but within each poll, there are multiple questions. So just make sure that you don't just stop at question number 1, that you actually keep scrolling down and you don't stop until you get to question number 4. So let me go ahead and launch that poll for you. And as you can see on the screen, you'll see question 1 and then question 2. Just click on the best answer or best response for each one, and then just keep scrolling down. Great, and I am seeing the responses coming in. I know that these questions probably take a little bit of thought, so we don't want to keep distracting you with talking, but it's looking great so far. So we'll give you about another 30 seconds or so. Looking good. I'm seeing the percentages rising. Thank you. Great. All right. We'll give you about 10 more seconds at this point. Go ahead and choose the best responses if you've not already. Okay, Sherard, we'll go ahead and end the polling.
All right.
And would you like us to share the results?
Yes, please.
All right, here we go.
All right, so let's get a look at this. So 48% of you think that answer A is correct for number 1. There's a tie for question number 2 between answer A and B. Answer 3, 67% of you selected D, and finally 52% of you selected category 4, answer B for number 4. All right, awesome. Thanks so much for that. So what's going to happen is we're going to deliver the same test at the end, and we'll see how much of a difference was made as the learning objectives were met. And we'll know if the learning objectives are met because you'll answer correctly, hopefully. So let me click. There we go. All right, so the first question is, what is the minimum viability development approach, right? So it is essentially the lean startup methodology combined with the ADDIE model and framed by the IACET standards. So what I'm gonna do is to go through each of these 3 components of the model, discuss them just a little bit so you can have some background, and then we'll move forward into how they combine in order to create for us a methodology that we can use. First thing that I want to introduce is the lean startup methodology. So essentially the lean methodology was designed by Eric Ries, and what he did was to propose a model of experimentation for building a business, which revolved around building a product or service, measuring the input and impact of the product on the stakeholders, and then learning from that feedback. And so as we create minimum viable products, these are things that are just enough for us to test a hypothesis. It's just enough for us to try to modify outcomes and to measure the feedback that we get as we present into the world and as we hear back from our stakeholders. Because the core of the lean startup methodology is the feedback loop that's created as you put information out and as you hear your response back from your stakeholders. And ultimately, the lessons learned lead to better builds, because the goal is for you, after you've learned, you've reapplied to build. And to most of us, that will sound very similar to the ADDIE model. ADDIE is obviously the most commonly applied instructional design system, and IACET employs that as part of the standard. So for the ADDIE model, we analyze, we design, we develop, we implement, and we evaluate. Once again, most of us are really familiar with this model already, but what happens is when we combine it with lean methodology in order to create, what happens is the analyze, design, and development implementation also happens really quickly so that we can gather feedback, and we don't attempt to make the absolute best course that we can make. At the onset, what we want to do is to make a course that's going to get us information about some of the assumptions that we have. For example, you all may be looking at this presentation and saying, wow, he was really, really lazy. There is nothing compelling. There's nothing visually stunning about this presentation, but the goal was for this to be a minimum viable course. And the goal was for me to apply the methodology that I'm offering to you to create this course so that you can see in real time, how does it look when you apply a minimum viability approach to developing a course, and then how do you learn from that? And next, there's the IACET standard that frames everything. So you notice that there's a pentagon around 5 elements, which are the instructional design categories in the standard. Those are needs analysis, learning outcomes, content and instruction, outcomes assessment, and evaluation. Once again, we'll find that there is clear linkage between the different elements of all 3 of the paradigms. So if you look at the learn element of the lean methodology, and you look at the evaluation element of the standard, which obviously directly ties to the evaluation element of the ADDIE model. So all of these things work together in order to give us a framework that really fortifies itself as it's used. So put everything together and you have a minimum viability approach that applies iterative development of the lean startup model and ADDIE model processes. And when I say iterative development, what I'm saying is the goal is to continue to make a better course. So every time you deliver a course, you'll learn from the course, and then you'll make a better course. And the goal is for you to do that rapidly so that you can arrive at the best version of the course that incorporates feedback and make sure that you are meeting the needs of the learner. Because at the end of the day, what separates effective programming from ineffective programming is meeting the needs of your stakeholders. And in order to meet the needs of the stakeholders, you have to know the needs of the stakeholders. And so that happens on the front end at an introductory level with the needs analysis. And then it comes back at the back end when you evaluate and find out what the experience was in the course. And then you tie a bow around it and start all over. So what we did was to develop the iterative course development document, which captures required process documentation that meets the elements of the standard. Once again, as long as I've been a commissioner or involved with IACET, I found that people really have a hard time wrapping their minds around the concept of documentation, and they find the idea of documentation to be kind of daunting. Many times there are things that we're doing, and we're doing them well. However, we aren't documenting them in a way that first allows it to be evaluated and assessed, but also doesn't allow it to pass on to future employees, people who are involved in the organization who may need to know how to do this so that the process continues to move forward as the process was designed, and the process continues to deliver the outputs that it was designed to deliver. And so that's really what the standard is about. For me, I evangelize the standard in the value of applying these processes to make your organization better, not just for the sake of the accreditation, but for the sake of quality improvement and continuous compliance within your organization. So minimum viability development approach principles are a short development and delivery cycle, which is going to be less than a month. You're going to keep it simple. There'll be clear documentation. There will be clear learning goals for the build. This is important. At the beginning of the course design process, you want to identify what it is that you want to learn. So what is it that I want to learn from this experience? How will I learn it and how will I measure it? Second, you want to have clear learning goals for the learner. What do I want the learners to learn? How will I teach it and how will I measure that? So we're going to jump into now the course that you're in, and we're going to go through the project timeline of how this course was developed in less than a month, right? So on August 31st, I had a conversation with our illustrious CEO, Cassandra Blasingame, and she asked for a presentation proposal for the conference. That same day, I performed a needs analysis. And essentially, this needs analysis was very simple. I asked, there was a questionnaire that had gone out to APs, and I asked for the outcomes of that questionnaire. And one of the questions, or one of the concerns that APs had presented was there was not enough time to develop and to research courses, especially in the online environment. And so I thought, that sounds like a problem that I would like to help solve. And that's really the basis of what the needs analysis was. It was really hearing the stakeholders, hearing the APs, and saying, okay, let's try to solve that with this solution. And so over the next couple of weeks, I developed this iterative course development document. Then I completed the document, and then I moved into course content creation. Today, September the 26th, we're actually delivering the presentation. So what else is going to happen today is we're going to gather feedback from it. After that, I'm going to analyze that feedback, then update the course development document, and then update the course content. So we're looking at maybe a month and a half to 2 months, a total cycle, and then we'll be ready to move into a second iteration of the course. So you all should have received or had access to the iterative course development document, and this is what it looks like, and the different, let's say, modules in it. We have the version for version control, version date, who it was completed by, the name of the course format, course length, a description of the course, a needs analysis summary, the learning objectives and rationale for those learning objectives, delivery methods and materials, the assessment method, the learner feedback method, the iterative course development notes for program improvement. That was a mouthful. That's an important part. That's where we really take what we learn and put it back into this document so that we can continue to improve the document. Then there's the course developer background and qualifications, proprietary interest, conflict of interest. And if you look over to the right, actually the document was too long to fit on a slide, so I had to cut the bottom off and put it next to us. But there's an internal and external audit section so that we can say, okay, here's when we looked at it, here are the notes when we looked at it, and here's when it was approved. And that's, again, putting all the elements together in the standard. And as we go through this, I'll identify which elements of the standard each module fits under, and you'll see how this course was developed using this methodology. All right, we are 20 minutes in, so we'll have another like 25 minutes to get through this before we have Q&A. So be sending your questions to Alexa because she will facilitate the Q&A when this is all over with, and I'm looking forward to some great questions. All right, so here's the first block, which is the version, the date, who was completed by. So the first version of this I did on September 16th. Here's the name of the course. The format was a virtual conference workshop session. Course length was an hour. That was prescribed. And so the description was to introduce IACET APs to a methodology that allows them to quickly develop, test, and iterate courses and document areas of compliance with the standard. So here we are in the second section, which is our needs analysis summary. And you all will notice that this is category 4. It's been identified for you. So the needs summary was, again, as I explained, there was a stakeholder survey of existing APs. we performed a summary analysis that revealed that a concern was not having time and resources to develop and deliver e-learning courses. So we agreed that this philosophy and its application and how it looks when plugged into the standard would be good to try. And what I did was to essentially just take a screenshot of the documentation of the email and stick it in there. So you'll see a red arrow that points to response number 2 in response to pain points in the self-reported challenges facing APs. And it says finding time to research and try out new courses and formats, e.g. online learning. And so this was directly from you guys' mouth. This is directly what you said a pain point was. And so we figured that it was important to attempt to address it. And hopefully we'll get the feedback from you, letting us know how well it was addressed and what could be done differently. And if it is even a worthwhile offering. And since we only spent 2 weeks developing it, it's not much of a loss if it doesn't work, but it's always a lesson and gives us an opportunity to point into a direction that will work for our APs. Next is the learning objectives and rationale. So again, based on the analysis, we figured there should be 2 approaches to developing. 1, introduce the key elements of this development approach, and to also describe a use case for the iterative course development document. And so this course is actually the use case, and I'm breaking that down for you and showing you how you can do this. Now, as we go through this, please feel free, if you have documented the iterative course development document, to take notes in it, to fill in what category element applies to that module, maybe even to take notes about a course that you may want to develop that this is giving you ideas about, because that's what this is about, is giving you a tool that you can use and something that will help you as you undergo IACET accreditation processes, whether it's submitting for reaccreditation, or it's actually new course development, or it's even, again, brainstorming courses that you want to develop. So taking each element as a terminal objective, the enabling learning objectives that I presented at the beginning of the course were developed, which were again to define minimum viability development as an approach, to identify what standard elements apply to the modules in the document, and to populate your own practice document. So next, the next module, delivery methods and materials. This is an online Zoom webinar that's managed by IACET staff, facilitated via PowerPoint, and then there's the iterative course development document. That's category 6, content and instructional methods. The assessment method is a pre-test poll function, again, managed by IACET staff. I didn't put the questions in here because I didn't want you guys to have the questions in advance. But again, that's category 7, assessment methods. And then the learner feedback method via SurveyMonkey that IACET staff is going to manage is program evaluation. I want to take one step back to this slide. The learning objectives, typically there's going to be a larger course design document. And what I would have done or what I would do in subsequent iterations of this course is to link this to a larger course design document. For the sake of this course, this was all we did in terms of course design. So there was not a larger document that kind of went into more detail and showed more connectiveness across learning objectives, because this is a test. All right, so now the iterative course development notes for program improvement. So this is what I did when I initially put the course together. The initial constraints I found were a short development timeline, but that's the reason that we developed the methodology, and a short delivery format. The delivery format I had no control over, and so it was really a matter of trying to fit the content into the time, which again, this is an experiment. We're going to be able to test our pacing to know if I provided enough information, to know if you have enough to move forward into your meeting of the learning objectives. And so I set certain course targets. And again, this ties to program evaluation and program effectiveness. I want to know about your experience as a user. I want to know what you feel about the value of the topic. And I want to know what you feel about the iterative course development document itself. The course outcomes and the thoughts for improvement will be populated once I get your feedback and once I kind of have this experience myself. I already know that I want to be able to control the pacing a little bit more. I want to be able to slow down. I want to be able to stop and ask questions as we go through different modules. But given the constraints of the format, I won't this time. But if this proves to be something that you all are interested in and we deliver it again, then the next iteration of this course will include those things. So at the bottom is where I filled out everything. And this is category 1, administration, and category 3, qualifications. So I am the course developer, Sherard Jones. My background as Tyree, I'm a commissioner serving as a lead reviewer with 15 years of experience with the standard, and I consult organizations and accreditation services. And I've worked in program development for large associations and jurisdictional agencies. This ties to in category 3, where we ask you about qualifications of instructors, personnel, design staff, etc. And again, this is an opportunity to put everything on one page. Next is proprietary interest. Yes, I do have a proprietary interest because I own Strategic Futurist and I developed the document. Is there a conflict of interest? No, there's not. So there's no need to describe it. All right, and finally, category 1.5, audit. So a lot of times I think APs have difficulty with the audit because people don't conceptualize how easy it could be. And even with documentation in general, we don't conceptualize how easy it could be. And all of these can be as simple as they need to be in order for it to be effective for the organization, right? And so in this case, for this particular document and even for future documents, this is simple enough. We would make this available to an auditor and they will look at the document and have feedback on it. They will audit it on a particular date, whoever the person is, we'd identify who that was, and they will make notes about the document, and then it will be reviewed and approved by some other oversight within the organization. So with that being said, I want to touch on the methodology again and give us some time to go back through the different elements and pull up the iterative course development document and talk about the specific modules once again. So first and foremost, this is the lean startup methodology tied with the ADDIE model. And it's tied, or rather bracketed, by the standards that are present, or rather the elements that are present within the IACET standard. So yeah, we'll do post-test first, and then we'll get into some questions and go back through the actual document. And I'll pull up the most recent version of the iterative document so you can see some of the things that I added in the final version of it, which includes some of the linkage between the learning objectives and the assessments and etc. Okay? Oh, so Alexa, would it be okay if you launched the poll once again?
Absolutely. So this is the second round. This is the post-test. So it's the same process as before. I'll go ahead and launch it, and you can now submit your answers. Just a reminder, this is the same test as before. We're just seeing if you think that your responses have changed or if they stay the same. And great, I'm seeing those percentages rising. Go ahead and keep submitting your responses. We'll do about 20 more seconds. Very interesting. All right, just a few more seconds and then we'll end the polling and share the results. I'm seeing some greater majority responses than the first time, and we'll take a look at that now. All right, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results.
All right, awesome. All right, so great. So learning has occurred. So yay, everybody. Give yourself a round of applause. So number 1, minimum viability development approach combines which of the following? The correct answer is Lean Startup methodology, the ADDIE model, and IACET standards. And 86% of us got that correct. So again, next time we do this, we'll probably screenshot the first poll and then screenshot this one and pull them up side by side. I think that would be awesome. Next, number 2, the goal of Lean Startup methodology is to create minimal viable products and to gather and analyze feedback. Fantastic. That is the correct answer. And 69% of us got that one correct. 3, all of the following are minimum viability development approach principles except for personnel planning, and with a whopping 90%, you got that one right. Finally, number 4, which category of the standard covers needs analysis? Category 4, correct. And once again, with an overwhelming 83%, you guys got that right. So congratulate yourselves. You learned something and you have evidence of it, or we have evidence of it based on your responses. So with that being said, what I want to do is to open up the other version of the iterative document that I created, which is this one. And then we'll share this one. Okay, so I didn't update the version on this one if you all see it. So this isn't version 2 yet, just because I haven't yet added the course outcomes and thoughts for improvement. So this isn't the second version of the document yet. However, there's more information where I've put the assessment method information in here. And so what I did was to create the linkages. What I did was for each of the questions in the assessment, I identified which learning objective it went with. So minimum viability development approach combines which of the following? That's learning objective 1, which is define minimum viability development approach. Next, the goal of the Lean Startup methodology is to blank and blank. Again, that was learning objective 1. And all of the following are minimum viability development approach principles except for, and that was again learning objective 1. And finally, which category of the standard covers needs analysis? That was learning objective 2. Identify which standard elements apply to modules in the iterative course development document. So just if I was looking at this, I would say that there is an imbalance in how my learning objectives are measured, and that I would have to look at ways to engage other learning objectives in the assessment in future iterations of the document. And we'll notice that there's no way for me to measure learning objective 3 because of the design of the course. So I'm not able to see if you've populated your practice document, and I haven't yet gotten feedback from any of you if you have populated the practice document, but I also understand that the time constraints of the course will likely limit my ability to execute this particular learning objective. But in future iterations, I might want to consider a modified course length, modified course format. Additionally, because I know that learning occurred with these, I know that something happened in order to make sure that you all got this information, but exactly what, I don't know yet. So I will find out if I was able to break down the polls a little bit and be able to analyze the assessment and to perform an analysis of responses. But once again, this is something that I will have to consider for future iterations of the course. So additionally, what would have happened is here in the learning objective section, I would likely put a link to, or at least a mention of course course design document with the name and then the location of that, which we did here. So if you look at this one, which I didn't focus on, we say see cropped image. This is an excerpt of the pain points document. So what would happen is if I were submitting this, then I would also submit the pain points document for you to review. Additionally, I would submit a full course document, a course design document for you to review. These assessment methods were built in. There are, for the delivery methods and materials, you all may not know, but IACET staff has developed a production guide, and that production guide governs how the Zoom webinar is being managed. So that would be something that will link to this, again, to demonstrate where the oversight is occurring, where the processes are being carried out, and what type of documentation serves as evidence of these processes being carried out. For example, this needs analysis summary is sufficient documentation. If I was doing a review and this was in your submittal and you had this summary explaining what happened and you showed me this cropped image, I would be satisfied with it as a commissioner. And so I say that to say that we don't necessarily have to complicate how we approach documentation, but we do it in an organic way that makes sense for our organization, that makes sense for our learners, and gets us to the outcomes that we want. So I'm really hoping that that you all like this course and that we get good feedback in order to be able to iterate it so that I can evaluate these course outcomes. So one thing that I want to focus on before we move to the next section and before we get to Q&A is these course targets. So prior to the end of this course, we'll do an immediate poll feedback, which I had identified here, right? So the immediate poll feedback is going to give me information about these three things. Once I get that information, I'll use that to populate course outcomes and find out what happened in relation to these targets. And then I'll be able to think of thoughts for improvement. And then we'll approach this whole process all over again. So with that being said, it is 12:37. Q&A is supposed to start at 12:45. So I'm thinking that we can go ahead and do the immediate poll, immediate course feedback, and then do the Q&A because the immediate course feedback, I think it's 6 questions. So I want to give you all enough time to give us that feedback, and then we'll move into the Q&A if that's okay with everyone. So Alexa, would you mind taking us to our next poll?
Sure thing. All right, I've launched the feedback poll. Go ahead and submit your responses. Thank you all. We're seeing those percentages coming in. It's great feedback. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. Go ahead and finish up your response. All right. So Sherard, I'm going to end the polling for this one and we'll display the results.
Awesome. All right, I like all of this orange. Let's see. All right, everyone is satisfied with the course experience. Yay! I feel that the learning objectives covered 100%. Yay! I would like to learn more about this topic. 83% of you, that is awesome. For the 5% of you, I would want to know why not. But again, that could be a follow-up, but I would be interested to know why not. I would pay to attend a longer workshop on this topic. 72% of you said yes. So what happens is this is the type of feedback that will help us to develop a longer workshop. And we would then iterate on maybe an hour 2-hour half-day workshop and figure out how to make that work for you guys. Next, I found the iterative course development document useful. 100%, yay! I'm excited about that. That is awesome. Again, that's for you guys to have. Hopefully, you find it useful in your course development activities. I would like to use the ICDD to develop courses. 86% of you said yes. That's awesome. That's great feedback. So please do, and then give us feedback about your experience with it. And next, I would like more practice and guidance in using the ICDD. That's 83%. And again, that ties back to the 3 previous questions about attending a workshop. Is the document useful, and would you like to use it for courses? So this is all fantastic feedback, and this is going to guide us into what potentially the next version of the course is going to be. So it's critical for us to do this and to create the feedback loop. And in a mere, in less than 30 days, we've put together a course, we've delivered a course, and we've gotten feedback on the course. So now in the next 30 days, we can figure out how to iterate the course and come up with a plan to create another product, and hopefully an even better product that's more useful to you as a stakeholder. So that is awesome. Thank you all so much for your time. We're a couple of minutes early going into the Q&A. I don't have a problem with that. If you all don't have a problem with that, and I'm open for questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Sherard. Participants, if you have any questions, you know the drill. Go ahead and send those in the question and answer dialog box, and we'll be able to address those here. I do see that somebody was interested in perhaps the specific design document that you were showing here. I'm not sure if this is different than what we have online. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a design document, it'd be similar to what you all have available online and what you use to guide APs through the workshop. And so what I was saying is you would link that if it was a more substantive course. So let's say you were maybe attempting to develop a course with more learning objectives, with more content, then in that case, I think it would make sense and it would benefit you to use a larger course design format instead of this one. This one is designed really just for a minimum viable course. But as you iterate, then you might want to get into more robust design and development tools. So that was the reference to that.
There's just a comment that the virtual production guide would be useful to see too.
Oh, the one that IACET used. Okay, well, I don't own that. But I think that it might be good to share what Randy's here. And he can let you know.
Yeah, I'll get I won't share the full document with you, but I'll share just Sherard's session with you guys. So I'm getting that created real quick, and I'll get a link out in the chat box in the next few minutes while y'all continue your question and answer.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay.
And then another question about the templates. Do you have a course design template to share?
Course design, well, it would be this. So this is the iterative course design document. I think it's really kind of a really simple and introductory tool that allows us or allows you to kind of practice developing. And I think versions of this, after you deliver a course and get feedback, then you would improve it, add upon it. It's very likely I'm going to add modules to this and put more things in it so that it becomes more of a complete tool. But again, it's iterative, and I want to create something at the very least to establish that there was a need for this type of document and that there was a need for this type of education, and that when presented, it would have a positive response on stakeholders. And so that was pretty much the assumption that I was coming in with, that there was a value proposition to this. And so the feedback that you all gave me with the immediate poll was that there is indeed a value proposition with this.
Great, thank you. Does ICCD approach bypass a pilot phase or is that often still done as the way to obtain the initial feedback to further iterate on the course design?
That is a great question. Well, essentially, what you're in is the pilot. So the ICDD document that I use to develop this course, and this course itself is the pilot, essentially, for what could lead into a larger course, something with more detail and something with more structure that expands upon the learning objectives and even adds learning objectives, and even could add more assessment methods, more assessment questions, and ways to involve. Because again, the third learning objective, I didn't even get to. There's no way that I'm able to walk you all through the practice of the document in this format. So that was just a completely failed objective, but that was again tied to the time constraints of the course. And that's kind of documented. And so in version 2, taking that into account, then we know at least it will have to be a 2-hour course, at least. Maybe it should be 4, but it gives us a direction to go in for what the next version of the course is going to be.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How would you handle non-synchronous courses in this method?
Non-synchronous courses in this method. All right, so for example, so part of what we're going to do, what IACET is doing is like we're recording these sessions. So likely what will happen is the rapid course development part, in my old life, what we used to do is we would sit in our offices and we would essentially hold a webinar by ourselves and record it. And so after we held the recorded webinar, we would chop it into modules because we had designed it modularly. We would chop it into modules. We would add knowledge checks, and then we would put it all together as a product. And so essentially that was my thought process for a course like this, was to take this first version of it, make it available with knowledge checks, and give people the opportunity to give feedback and to access it asynchronously. And so so it works the same way. Once again, if you go into the course document, not course document, excuse me, the course format section of this document, you can kind of choose how it is that you want to design it. But the purpose of this is to very quickly put information out and to get feedback from the audience that you're targeting. And so it doesn't have to be pretty. Once again, you saw this course, it was a white background with black letters, and that's all it was. And so it can be that simple, especially if you hand pick a pilot group, to the question that I answered before. If you hand pick a pilot group of stakeholders and say, hey, I want to give you all an opportunity to test drive this course that we put together and get feedback, then you can start your process going, and then they can give you the feedback as to, well, should this be longer? Would you pay for it? How much would you pay for it? And start to gather that feedback, as opposed to being in a vacuum and imagining the feelings and the thoughts of your stakeholders. Was that a sufficient response? I think I kind of went off tangent a little bit.
I think it was great. Thank you. Let's see, all these great questions. Would you please review again your needs analysis process? How extensive should it be?
I think the needs analysis process, so in this case, the needs analysis process was reaching back to a stakeholder survey that IACET had performed. And so based on the responses that we got from that survey, it was just a qualitative analysis where we looked at the list and said, well, what did people say? And so the number 2 response that I saw on the list was people don't feel that they have time to research, develop, and to pilot new courses. And based on that, I thought, well, maybe we could solve a problem by applying this solution. And this is the solution that we're testing. And so again, based on your feedback, I think we had a good response to that question, and we had a good solution, at least at the beginning of, we have a good beginning of a solution, let's say that. And so now we know that this is a direction that we could go in, and at given time, this could be valuable. And you all have already, at least minimally, validated the value proposition that we assumed.
Great. This question probably was referring back to maybe the design document, another document that was brought up. Would you automate this type of form when managing accreditation processes for multiple courses?
That's an interesting question. I'm always about automation. So if there's any way that we can do something once and then it works a bunch of times, I love it. But a way to do that, I haven't figured that out yet, but I think there's a way to automate this type of form if we're talking about particular course formats, or if, let's say, for example, you've done this a number of times and you understand what populates or what should be in a workshop conference, or you know what should be in a half-day workshop, or you know what should be in a full-day workshop. Then those will maybe have certain modules that are already ready for you and could even be populated based on data sources that you feed into it. So, I mean, if there's a way for you to create a system that automatically populates needs analysis data, from surveys, that would be awesome. If you had a way to automatically connect and to populate production guides and other templates, that would be awesome. But once again, with all of this, it's a matter of experimenting and seeing what makes sense for your organization's application of the tool.
Thank you. That's great. Do you recommend the use of Bloom's taxonomy to write objectives?
Absolutely, all the time. So, I mean, that's like standard guidance in the CET standard, is that we use Bloom's taxonomy to identify the different levels of learning. Obviously, if you look at this course, this was the lowest level. This was really about identification and description, and it really went not much further than that. Even populating a practice document didn't occur, but definitely you want to apply Bloom or employ Bloom's taxonomy.
And we do have a resource about that on our website available under the resources tab, at least to get you started on that. So just visit our website, IACET.org, and then it should be called Bloom's Taxonomy. It's in a PDF form on our website.
Awesome.
What might be the baseline to determine when to use the iterative process versus the more comprehensive phased approach?
I think it would be a matter of being very clear on all of the givens and all of the unknowns and the variables, so to speak. So in this instance, we had a simple needs analysis, and we made an assumption based on that needs analysis. And we wanted to be able to do it quickly without investing a lot of resources in it. So sometimes the needs analysis is more robust, and there's been a larger needs analysis that's been performed that maybe has identified a number of things, and they're very clear about those things in terms of who the target audiences are, what type of outcomes they're looking for, what's the cost if they don't meet the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really, there's much more clarity about the need. So in this instance, we had a very simple need statement that in and of itself hadn't been validated further than its presentation. And so part of what using this iterative approach is validating the assumptions, and we wanted to validate that need. So that's really the goal of this course, was to validate the need as it had been identified, but then also to validate the viability of a novel solution.
And then I think this was also dating back to a previous question. What about a more detailed version to align with the standard? I think this was in reference to an example document or a template, perhaps. Or I guess in term, because we've had a few questions about templates and
Right.
design documents. Would you say that the resources that we have in the portal are probably the best ones to use, or is there something?
Absolutely. So when we talk about a detailed version, and when we talk about the tools, the resources that IACET already makes available, I think that those are great, especially the course design document, other, let's say, supplemental materials that come out of the workshop and webinars and et cetera. I think that those are really great. So so I would definitely encourage using those. This version, once again, this is version 1 of a document. And so what will happen is as we use it, it'll change. And so maybe like version 5 might be more robust, or maybe, you know, a later version. By the time we get to version 6, it might, what's the word? Supplant the existing course design document resources that we make available. So it's really just allowing ourselves to take that journey and really approaching this as scientists and enjoying this. So like for me, this is like fun for me. And so like, I like it. Like, hey, here's a document. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. So, and I like that type of feedback. And I really am an evangelist of the instructional design process as IACET puts it into the standard, and as we see it done according to, you know, best practices in the field. So this is part of that. And again, as Ty told you, I work with one of my other businesses is called Viable, and it's really about taking a process approach to developing a business. But the same methodology is present, and you have to understand what your stakeholders need. You have to understand what they want, and you have to figure out a way to test your assumptions about solving their problems. And so what this does for us is to give us an opportunity to try something in a month, and it's low cost and it's low risk. And that's really what this is about. When you want to mitigate the risk and you don't want to invest a year in development on a course that may or may not work. So what this is really about is validating that the market that you think exists really exists, and then validating that the solution that you propose is really a viable solution. And then once you do that, then you would invest more resources into course development. You maybe would invest more resources into instructors, even if it was as far as, you know, putting something into an LMS or something. So this is really just to be sure to give you the confidence to move forward in developing the best product that's most responsive to your stakeholders.
Great, wonderful. We have a few more questions. So if you have any last minute ones, go ahead and send those in. For our next one, how much hard data is actually needed for a needs analysis as opposed to the presenter's observations in the field in question? That is, can it be soft data?
Right. So soft data is fine to start with as long as we plug into a system that allows us to validate it. So as long as we're building a system that includes program evaluation methodology and a methodology that allows us to gather feedback from our learners and apply it to validating the needs analysis and the assumptions that come out of the needs analysis, then we're good. So like, for example, we're having a conversation yesterday at dinner. Alexa was telling us about magpies in Australia. So, I mean, that's her firsthand experience, but could we develop something that helps people to protect themselves against magpie attacks in Australia? Well, what causes a magpie attack? And we start trying and we put something out there, and then we get feedback on it. And so once we get feedback on it, then we can iterate and say, well, here's what the data says. Once people got into this class and once we gave them this information, this was the response. This was the feedback that we got back from them. And yeah, it was a good assumption that we made and was based on anecdotal evidence and personal experience. However, through putting it through a framework, we were able to validate it. So most things begin, I mean, the first element of science is observation. I mean, that's one. The first thing you do is I see it, I hear it, I experience it, and then I document that experience, and then I try to make sense of the experience. And so that's essentially what we're doing with instructional design, is we're looking at the field and we're analyzing the information that we're getting, and we're trying to find patterns and trends in that information. And so if we suspect that there is a pattern or a trend, then we'll test the assumption about the pattern or the trend, right? And then once we get the feedback back, oh yeah, that's validated, now let's do this. And then we make it better and better. And we just keep going until we have satisfied stakeholders.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great method. And we got a thank you from one of the questions.
Awesome.
All right, well, it's looking like we've come up to the end of all of our questions. Again, if you have anything else, feel free to send that in. But otherwise, thank you so much, Sherard. I think that we will get ready to pass this back to Jessica.
Awesome.
But thank you so much again.
Thanks, everybody. I had a ball.
Thank you, Sherard.
Hey, bye-bye.
Thank you, Sherard, for that information on program viability and rapid course development the right way. We've got one more session starting at 2:45 today on the learning needs of the virtual worker. Following this session, we'll begin the award ceremony, so be sure to stick around. Before we start that session, please take a quick break to stretch your legs, and also don't forget to head to our brand new IACET Instagram. You can find it under the handle of IACET.org, that's IACET.org, to enter into our IACET 2020 VC photo contest. To join the next session, please head to your annual conference portal and follow the link. We look forward to seeing you there.